Nightmare on the Trail. The group of hikers set out on the southern portion of the Appalachian Trail, eager to enjoy the beautiful scenery and challenge themselves with the rugged terrain. Among them was Harold, an experienced hiker who had conquered the trail before. As night began to fall, they found a suitable spot to set up camp. The group unpacked their gear and started to build their shelters for the night. But as they settled in, they soon realized they were not alone. A strange, eerie feeling hung in the air, and the hikers felt as though they were being watched. Suddenly, one of their hammocks was ripped away, and a blood-curdling scream pierced the silence. The group leapt into action, trying to find their missing friends. But as they searched the woods, they soon realized that they were being hunted. A mysterious figure loomed over them, its face shrouded in darkness. The hikers tried to fight back, but their efforts were futile as the creature seemed to be everywhere at once. As the night wore on, the group became increasingly desperate, their fear growing with each passing moment. They realized that their only hope was to make it to the safety of civilization before it was too late. But the creature was relentless, stalking them through the woods, picking them off one by one. Harold, the seasoned hiker, was the last one standing, but even he was no match for the creature's cunning and strength. In the end, Harold was the only survivor, barely making it out alive. He returned to civilization, a broken and traumatized man, haunted by the nightmare on the trail that he could never forget. For years, Harold tried to put the horrors of that night behind him. He sought therapy and support groups to help him cope with the trauma, but nothing seemed to ease the nightmares that plagued him. Eventually, Harold decided that he needed to face his fears head-on. He returned to the southern portion of the Appalachian Trail, determined to find out what had attacked him and his friends. As he hiked through the woods, Harold's nerves were on edge, every rustling leaf making him jump. But as the hours turned into days, he found no trace of the creature that had haunted him. Just as he was about to give up, Harold stumbled upon a small, isolated cabin. The hairs on the back of his neck stood on end as he approached, but something drew him inside. As he explored the cabin, Harold found a journal belonging to the previous occupant, a hermit who had lived in seclusion for years. In its pages, Harold found a chilling account of a creature that lived in the woods, feeding on hikers and campers who ventured too close. The more Harold read, the more he realized that the creature was not just a figment of his imagination. It was real, and it was still out there, waiting for its next victim. Harold left the cabin with a renewed sense of purpose. He knew that he had to warn others about the danger lurking in the woods. He started a blog, sharing his story and urging others to be cautious when hiking the Appalachian Trail. As more and more hikers came forward with their own tales of encounters with the creature, Harold became a beacon of hope, a voice for those who had been silenced by fear. And even though the nightmare on the trail would never truly leave him, Harold found solace in knowing that he had turned his trauma into something positive, something that could help others stay safe in the great outdoors. Harold's blog gained a following, and he became a respected authority on hiking safety, particularly in the southern portion of the Appalachian Trail. He dedicated his life to educating others about the dangers of the woods and helping them prepare for the worst-case scenarios. Over time, Harold's blog evolved into a non-profit organization that provided resources, training, and support to hikers and campers. He became a sought-after speaker, traveling the country to share his story and promote safe hiking practices. But even as he helped others, Harold could never shake the memories of that fateful night on the trail. The creature haunted his dreams, and he often found himself looking over his shoulder, even in the safety of his own home. As he grew older, Harold began to worry that he would never find closure. But then one day, he received a letter from an anonymous source. Inside, he found a map leading to a remote location in the woods. Without hesitation, Harold set out on the journey, his heart pounding with a mix of fear and excitement. When he arrived, he found himself face to face with a creature that had terrorized him all those years ago. But this time, Harold was ready. He drew upon all his training and experience, using his wits and his instincts to fight back. And to his amazement, he emerged victorious, banishing the creature from the woods for good. As he made his way back to civilization, Harold felt a weight lifted from his shoulders. For the first time in years, he felt truly free, his nightmares replaced by a sense of triumph and hope. And even though he knew that the woods would always be dangerous, Harold also knew that he had the strength and the courage to face whatever lay ahead. The Darkening Trail. The family had been planning their hike on the Appalachian Trail for months. They were excited to get away from the hustle and bustle of the city and spend some quality time in nature, but as they set out on the trail, they couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. They shrugged it off as their imaginations running wild and continued on their way. But as they hiked deeper into the woods, the feeling only grew stronger. It wasn't long before they veered off the trail, drawn by the sight of an abandoned cabin in the distance. Against their better judgment, they decided to investigate. As they approached the cabin, they noticed that it was old and decrepit, with the roof caving in and the windows boarded up. But despite its dilapidated appearance, the cabin seemed to exude an airy energy as if it were alive. Inside, the family found evidence of a recent inhabitant, a few items of clothing, some canned goods, and a rusty axe. But there was no sign of anyone living there now. As they explored the cabin, the family began to feel a sense of unease. The air grew thick and oppressive, and strange noises echoed through the walls. It wasn't long before they realized that they were not alone. The cabin was home to a malevolent presence, an ancient evil that had been trapped there for centuries. The family tried to leave, but the cabin seemed to have a hold on them. They were trapped, unable to escape as the evil presence closed in. As the night wore on, the family was forced to fight for their lives, battling against the darkness that surrounded them. They wielded the rusty axe and anything else they could find, determined to survive. In the end, only one member of the family emerged from the cabin alive. Scarred and traumatized by the horrors they had witnessed, they want others to stay away from the cabin, but some say that the malevolent presence still lingers there, waiting for its next victim to wander off the trail and into its grasp. The survivor of the cabin's terror was never the same again. They struggled to sleep, plagued by nightmares of the evil presence that had almost claimed their life. They tried to warn others about the dangers of straying off the trail, but few believed their story. Over time, the survivor became obsessed with the cabin and the evil presence that had haunted it. They returned to the site of the cabin multiple times, hoping to gain some kind of understanding of what had happened there. As they dug deeper into the history of the area, they discovered that the cabin had been built by a reclusive family over a century ago. The family had been rumored to practice dark rituals and make offerings to an ancient deity that lived in the woods. It was said that the deity had granted the family immense power and wealth in exchange for their devotion. But as time went on, the family grew more and more twisted, performing unspeakable acts in the name of their deity. Eventually, the community had had enough and drove the family from the area. But the evil presence remained, trapped within the cabin's walls. The survivor realized that they had stumbled upon something far beyond their comprehension, a force of ancient evil that had been lying dormant for generations. But as they continued to delve deeper into the history of the cabin, the survivor began to feel that they were being watched once again. It seemed that the evil presence had not been defeated after all, and that it was still seeking revenge. The survivor knew that they had to act fast before the evil presence could claim more victims. They set out on a mission to banish the evil from the woods for good, armed with the knowledge and determination they had gained from their experiences. Whether the survivor succeeded in banishing the evil or became another victim of the malevolent presence remains unknown, but those who venture into the woods near the abandoned cabin do so at their own risk, as the Darkening Trail still holds many secrets and horrors yet to be discovered. The Devil's Backbone. The hikers had been warned about the dangers of the Appalachian Trail, but they never could have imagined the terror that awaited them on the Devil's Backbone. As they trekked deeper into the mountain, they could feel the weight of the ancient spirits watching them, waiting for them to make a misstep. At first, it was just small things, strange noises in the night, unexplained movements in the trees. But as they neared the burial ground, the terrors became more real. They saw ghostly apparitions hovering in the air and heard the mournful cries of the dead echoing through the valley. Despite their fear, the hikers pressed on, determined to uncover the truth behind the curse. They dug deep into the ancient history of the mountain and learned of the evil that had been buried beneath the earth for centuries. As they delved deeper, they began to feel the pull of the darkness. They saw things that couldn't possibly be real and heard whispers that turned their blood to ice. But they pressed on, knowing that the only way to break the curse was to confront the evil that lay at the heart of the mountain. And finally, they came upon the source of the curse, a gaping mouth that led deep into the earth, a gateway to the underworld. And standing guard over the portal was the devil himself, his eyes glowing with a malevolent light. The hikers knew that they had to face him head-on or be trapped in the curse forever. They summoned all their courage and charged forward. Weapons raised. The battle was long and grueling, but finally, the devil was vanquished. The curse was broken, and the hikers emerged from the mountain victorious, their souls forever marked by the horror they had endured. From that day forward, the Appalachian Trail was never quite the same. The hikers who had survived the devil's backbone knew that there were always dark forces at work, waiting to claim unwary souls. But they also knew that they had the strength to face them, to push forward through the terror and emerge victorious. For on the Appalachian Trail, the horrors never truly end. But even though the hikers had defeated the devil and broken the curse, they could never quite shake the feeling that something was watching them, waiting for them to let down their guard. They found themselves haunted by nightmares of the evil that had been unleashed on the mountain, and plagued by visions of the devil's twisted form. They tried to put the horrors behind them and move on with their lives, but the memory of what they had seen and experienced on the devil's backbone stayed with them, a constant reminder of the darkness that lurked just beyond the edge of the trail. Years went by, and the hikers grew old and gray, but the memory of that fateful journey never faded. They passed on their stories to their children and grandchildren, warning them of the dangers of the Appalachian Trail and the curses that lay buried deep within the mountains. And as the generations passed, the stories became legend, whispered around campfires and shared in hushed tones in hostile bunk beds. The devil's backbone became a place of myth and legend, a cautionary tale for all who dared to venture too far off the beaten path. But for the hikers who had lived through the horror, the memory remained all too real. A reminder that sometimes the most terrifying things in life are the ones we can't see coming. And as they closed their eyes at night, they could still feel the weight of the devil's gaze upon them, a constant reminder of the darkness that lay just beyond the trail. The Haunted Hostel. The hikers arrived at the hostel just as the sun was setting, exhausted and hungry from their long day on the Appalachian Trail. The hostel was a ramshackle building with peeling paint and a creaky porch, but it was warm inside, and the smell of cooking food filled the air. As they settled in for the night, they heard strange noises coming from the walls. At first they thought it was just the wind, but then they realized that something was moving around in the darkness. Suddenly, the lights went out, plunging the hostel into darkness. The hikers groped around in the dark, trying to find their way, but they kept bumping into each other and tripping over furniture. Then, they heard a low, guttural growl coming from the shadows. The hairs on the back of their necks stood up, and they realized that they were not alone in the hostel. As they huddled together, terrified, the spirit of the hostel's former owner revealed itself. It was a twisted, malevolent force, fueled by rage and a desire for revenge. The hikers tried to fight back, but they were no match for the vengeful spirit. It toyed with them, luring them deeper into the hostel's dark and winding corridors, using their fear against them. But as the night wore on, the hikers began to uncover the dark secrets of the hostel's past. They learned of the terrible things that had happened there, and they realized that the spirit was not just seeking revenge, but also trying to protect its secrets. With newfound determination, the hikers fought back against the spirit, using their knowledge of its past to weaken its hold over them. They chanted ancient spells and performed bizarre rituals, and slowly but surely, the spirit began to lose its grip on the hostel. And then, the hikers emerged victorious, having survived a night of terror and uncovered the secrets of the haunted hostel. But as they hiked away from the building, they couldn't shake the feeling that something was still watching them, waiting for its chance to strike again. As they continued on the Appalachian Trail, the hikers couldn't shake the feeling that they were being followed. They heard whispers on the wind and saw shadows moving in the trees. They knew that the spirit of the haunted hostel was still out there, watching them. The days turned into weeks, and the hikers pushed on, hoping to put the nightmare behind them. But the spirit was not so easily defeated. It haunted their dreams, and they woke up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat and filled with terror. Finally, they came upon a group of locals who had lived in the area for generations. They told the hikers of an ancient curse that had been placed on the land, a curse that could only be broken by a brave and determined soul. The hikers knew what they had to do. They returned to the hostel, armed with the knowledge of the curse and the determination to break it. They chanted ancient incantations and performed bizarre rituals, and finally the curse was broken. The spirit of the haunted hostel was banished, and the hikers were free to continue their journey along the Appalachian Trail. They hiked on knowing that they had faced the greatest terror of their lives and emerged victorious. But they also knew that the curse was not the only danger lurking on the trail. They kept their eyes peeled and their senses sharp, ready to face whatever horrors lay ahead. For on the Appalachian Trail, there was always something waiting in the shadows, ready to strike at any moment. The Wendigo's Curse. The group of hikers knew that they were taking a risk by attempting the Appalachian Trail during the winter months. The locals had warned them against it, citing the harsh weather conditions and the dangers that lurked in the woods. But the hikers were determined to prove their strength and resilience, and so they set out on the trail, ignorant of the true danger that awaited them. As they hiked deeper into the woods, the temperature dropped drastically and the wind howled around them, making it difficult to hear each other's voices. It was then that they started to hear whispers in the wind, whispers that seemed to be calling out their names. At first, they dismissed it as a trick of the wind, but as the whispers grew louder and more insistent, they realized that something was very wrong. They huddled together for warmth, trying to ignore the strange noises that echoed through the trees. But as the night fell, they were faced with a terror that was beyond their imagination. Out of the darkness emerged a creature unlike anything they had ever seen before. It was tall and thin, with matted fur and twisted antlers. It looked like a combination of a human and a deer, and its eyes glowed with an otherworldly light. The creature was the Wendigo, a mythical beast that was said to haunt the forests of the Appalachian Mountains. Legend had it that the Wendigo was a cursed creature, driven to madness by its insatiable hunger for human flesh. As the hikers looked on in horror, the Wendigo let out a bone-chilling howl and charged towards them. The hikers tried to run, but they were no match for the Wendigo's speed and agility. One by one, they were snatched up by the creature's sharp claws and dragged into the darkness. Those who managed to survive the attack were left with a curse that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. They became obsessed with the Wendigo, haunted by its presence even after they had left the woods. The hikers learned a hard lesson about the dangers of ignoring the warnings of locals and attempting to conquer the Appalachian Trail during the winter months. The curse of the Wendigo would follow them for the rest of their days, a reminder of the price of their foolishness. Years passed, but the survivors of the Wendigo's attack never forgot the horror they experienced that fateful night on the Appalachian Trail. Some of them turned to alcohol and drugs to cope with the trauma, while others withdrew from society altogether, too afraid to venture out into the world again. But one of the survivors, a young woman named Sarah, refused to let the Wendigo's curse defeat her. She became obsessed with the creature, reading every book she could find on it and scouring the internet for any information that might help her understand it better. Eventually, Sarah learned of a ritual that was said to break the Wendigo's curse, a dangerous and forbidden practice that involved making a deal with the creature. Despite the risks, Sarah was determined to try the ritual, believing that it was her only hope of breaking free from the Wendigo's curse. She returned to the Appalachian Trail, accompanied by a small group of friends who were willing to help her. They trekked through the woods, fighting off the cold and the wind, until they reached the spot where the Wendigo had attacked them all those years ago. With shaking hands, Sarah lit a fire and began the ritual, speaking the ancient words that were said to appease the Wendigo. For a moment, nothing happened. Then there was a rustling in the bushes, and the Wendigo emerged from the darkness, its eyes fixed on Sarah. The creature circled her, sniffing at her hair and her clothing, as if trying to decide whether or not to accept her offer. Finally, it let out a low growl and disappeared into the night, leaving Sarah and her friends alone on the trail once more. Sarah didn't know if the curse had been broken, but she felt a sense of relief wash over her. She had faced her fear and survived, and that was enough for now. As she and her friends made their way back to civilization, Sarah couldn't help but wonder what other dangers lurked in the woods, waiting for unsuspecting hikers to stumble upon them. But for now, she was content to be alive and free from the Wendigo's curse.